And good morning. Indeed, here we are with Alastair Clayton, CEO of Artemis Resources. And we're here to talk about the recent RNS and some of the projects that are going on around the Artemis Resources. Alastair, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Liam. Good to be here. Tough couple of weeks in the markets. I'm sure all your listeners will be aware of that. But yeah, lots to talk about.
Absolutely. This morning, as if almost on cue, you popped out a tweet with a checklist of some of the things that are going on and that are really exciting for Artemis Resources. And at the top of that list is the fact that you're based in Australia. What in your mind makes it a safe tier 1 jurisdiction?
Yeah, look, I suppose, I guess that checklist is a little bit of a sort of mental download for myself. And look, everything there is in the public domain, so I don't have a problem talking about it. But I mean, when the tide goes out and people start to worry, it's really important to look at your investments from a top-down risk perspective. And this is my own personal advice to myself. And look, starting with jurisdiction. At the end of the day, where's your money? What country is it in? What are the factors that you can control and that you can't? And look, quite simply, Western Australia is the best mining destination in the world, both from a legal perspective, from a licensing perspective, from an ability to operate, and prosecuting your rights as an owner of an asset over a period of time. And that's got to be fundamental. And I certainly think, I think both you and I are old enough to have seen a few of these updrafts and downdrafts in global markets, and nothing comes into more sharper focus about where your money's actually invested than times like now.
And it's as someone who has invested in Western Australian companies, my research has led me to see that the Department of Mines and Petroleum are really actually proactive in being all encompassing with the companies, and they work with the companies, and there is a very linear process that everybody has to go through, whether you're buying a 3 meter square bit of land or a 65 kilometer piece of land. So it keeps things very simple that way, doesn't it? Whereas if you're in a country, I think like Chile, where the government all of a sudden decide they want to tax you for 75% of what you pull out of the ground, that makes it a bit different, doesn't it?
Look, it sure does. And I suppose the great point about the West Australian Mining Act and the various legislations that sort of orbit around that is that, first of all, they're well thought out, they're well tested, both in law and in commercial reality of how the companies operate and how can you plan for the future, both from an expenditure and timeframe perspective. Look, there's no doubt that certainly with ESG and cultural heritage issues, there has been an increasing burden. But at the end of the day, the State Mining Act, which is the legislation we fall under, is, I believe, well documented. It's well written. It has that commercial idea in mind. I mean, certainly, just as a comment around the world, and you mentioned Chile, but a range of other very large, important mining companies. Look, there's no doubt there's an outbreak of resource nationalism. That is seen as state-owned assets, and I wouldn't want to opine on whether individual countries or regions are the industry is paying its way. But all I know in Western Australia is the industry is key. It is quite frankly loved within you've only got to look at the Perth skyline and all the skyscrapers of BHP, Rio Tinto, Fortescue, South 32. So at the end of the day, over and above probably the best geology in the world, to have that sort of background. As I said, especially when risk is in a sharper focus period as it is now, that's got to be a good thing, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of good things, it also helps that gold and copper are still holding really strong over the larger time frame, aren't they? I appreciate it's down at the moment from where it was maybe a year and a half ago, but when we compare ourselves to where we were in 2012, it's actually looking really quite promising, isn't it?
Oh, look, absolutely. And copper is clearly the end. I know there's a lot of interest in other metals, but copper is at the heart of everything electrical. You've only got to dismantle your vacuum cleaner motor to understand that, and that's not changing in a hurry. And look, quite frankly, whether copper price is 10,000 a tonne or 9,800 a tonne, that's fine. I mean, the price is still fantastic. And, there's plenty of research your listeners can do about future supply constraints. You mentioned resource nationalism, or we mention it in Chile and other key jurisdictions. I only think that's going to come even more towards the sharp end in terms of supply deficits. But the prices we're looking at on the copper side, fantastic, bring them on. As for gold, look, again, your readers can read all sorts of literature and commentary about the current gold market. I'll just make the simple observation, $1,860 an ounce is a fantastic gold price. You are getting that dual insulation in a US dollar hedge anyway, and bring it on. I mean, like I said, I've heard that many doomsday scenarios on gold that the price is going to collapse, etc., and Bitcoin is the future. Well, and again, I'm not a Bitcoin expert, but I'm just looking at the current price action when risk is in sharper focus, and I've drawn my own conclusions.
Absolutely. Now, back towards the late part of last year, after we had our last discussion, you or one of your team was so kind as to present a assay, a core assay that had come out of the ground from your Apollo, I think it was, hole. And what a fine piece of rock that was. Now, I am no expert, unlike yourself, but that looked an extremely interesting piece of rock. Could you tell us a little bit more about what made that so interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, no, indeed, Liam. And look, there's a reason that we assay. Okay, let's be clear. Look, I was up at Radio Hill, 3 or 4 weeks ago, looking at the core with my own hot little hands. It looked great. It had, it had a lot of the sort of factors that you're looking for, and I think we tried to articulate that in our news release recently. It had the alteration, it had the sulfide mineralisation and those sort of things. Now, disappointingly, it didn't carry any gold, and that is sometimes the way it goes. You can have 4 or 5 preconditions met, and you could be missing one precondition, or as I tried to sort of opine in simple layman's terms, a missing piece of the puzzle. Okay, and it is a puzzle. We're all putting, this thing is cloaked under hundreds of metres of cover, and Newcrest, as I keep saying, Newcrest, Rio Tinto, Greatland and Artemis, none of us have magic X-ray eyes based on our market capitalisation that give us further knowledge. We have to drill, and of course the decline going down into Javier when it gets there will be very telling and allow for more examination of the causative factors. What made that gold deposit there, and what are the factors we need to check off? Find another one. So with that in mind, look, first 3 holes, 3.5 holes didn't have any gold or copper in it like we'd hoped. I do feel that people have to contextualise that. We've only just started, and I appreciate it. It feels like we've been exploring for a long time because heritage process, wet season. So I suppose, the calendar moves forward, and the team are busting every sinew every day to get work done and to get going as fast as possible. But we have to do things properly. We have to go through the various steps, and there are no shortcuts. And so with that in mind, we were surprised that there was no gold background in that could have helped us. But that is the nature of exploration. I suppose looking at the results for Newcrest made comment that it would appear just from their brief comments that they may have seen very similar things to us from their drilling nearby. That's exploration. If exploring just meant finding something on the first hole every time, then that'd be terrific. And Greatland Gold would have never discovered Javier because Newcrest would have discovered it in 1996. So look, I appreciate people want success with the first couple of holes. So do we. But that is the nature of exploration. We are not pleased by not delivering the results that everyone wants. Of course we're not. We're not stupid. But we do accept that as an explorationist. You have to accept that you're not going to be right all the time. But the key is then to learn from what you've seen, try and work out what that missing piece of the puzzle is, and move forward. And from our perspective, Lem, it's actually hasn't changed our exploration because we'd only just started the program anyway. We are not going through it systematically in the basis of being blind to what we've seen. But we're barely started. I mean, it almost sounds like a plea to shareholders, but we've barely started our journey, and I know it's frustrating. I know it feels like things are going slowly, and things are slow in the industry. They genuinely are, and they affect everybody basically in the same way. There's no way of managing your way around staff shortages and rig shortages, etc. But at the end of the day, the investment premise behind Patterson the company, and specifically talking about Patterson Central, just quite frankly hasn't changed.
No. And just for a bit of context, I don't suppose, do you know how big your land mass is on that tenement, roughly? Is there but basically my point is, I was just going to say, like, you're putting a 6-inch hole into however big, and I should really know the answer to this, but however big your tenement is.
Yeah, I mean, look, our license is it's about 600 square kilometres. I mean, that's not a metric that we typically use. But look, the point is valid. Okay, at the moment we've drilled 3 and a bit holes into our corridor that we're drilling. I think we discussed this last time, adjacent to the major north-south fault that bisects the Javier deposit, and is certainly showing up some great drill results creeping north along that fault that we saw released the other week from, I think they call it the Eastern Breccia, which confusingly is moving north. That's our thesis, has been our thesis for years, and we've currently put a couple of holes in it, and we have about what we would consider prospective, about 15 kilometres to drill test. We're looking for big targets. It doesn't mean they're pretty big needles, but it's a big haystack. So if that makes any sense. At the moment, our drill pads are about between 400, 450 metres and 2 kilometres apart. To say you could drive a Javier or two between the holes in that is pretty obvious. You could. I think we had a map on our last RNS about the project that tried to demonstrate that. So what's our job? Look, our job's like fishermen. Our job is to try and get things caught in the net by having the most efficient way of testing these on a dollar per discovery basis, and that's what we're doing. We are looking for big targets in a deep ocean, but of course we can see the value of the prizes on offer. The sort of once in a career type discoveries, and that from a risk reward basis is something that we've always said we want to take on, and is such an integral part of the Artemis offering.
A year ago, obviously, you had no idea what was under the ground. You could only go from the aeromags and any geophys that you've done. Now we're a year later. You've now got an idea of what that 3D model looks like with the cores that you've now got. That now makes it easier, in some respects, to have an idea of what you're looking for this time around. So what sort of jigsaw pieces are you looking for that sort of guide you in your next, we're going to stick our next drill hole in this place, in this direction sort of thing? What?
Essentially, I think we were looking in gravity lows, looking for these diorites, these dioritic rocks that are at the centre of Javier and seem to play some key role in the mineralisation. If you noted the location of our drill holes, we were quite far to the west on our licence. Okay, so we were quite far to the left-hand side of the fault as you're looking at a map. What we suspect, and we've always suspected, we've always spoken about the fault. So I suppose the question then throws up: okay, you found the right sort of rocks, whether they were source rocks or not is up for debate, but you found the right sort of rocks. They had lots of shiny sort of sulfides in them that weren't carrying gold. So, as a basic sort of detective story, what could be the piece that's missing? Well, I think the obvious point is maybe we were a little bit far from the fault, because as something happened along that fault, you have to have the rocks and the geology, and you have to have activation along that fault, because Javier seems to be at the confluence of two of those preconditions. Okay. You seem to have the right rocks next to the fault, in fact, being bisected by the fault. That's certainly a possibility, and I think that will feed into our thinking. To be frank with you, that's always fed into our thinking. In terms of where we drilled at the end of last year, you'll be aware we were chasing the clock. We lost a hole, unfortunately, that was actually sort of straddling that fault. And really, it's a detective game of sort of maximising your chances, as you say. I think we're all learning. We read with in great detail everything that Newcrest and Clayton put out about their project because it provides clues to everyone. The short answer is we do learn. It's an iterative process, and of course, the key with exploration is to reduce the iterations because iterations have a cost. Every time you drill a hole, it costs you money. So The short answer is yes, we do. Yes, it fits within our model anyway. We sometimes don't have the power to drill everything all at the same time. So yeah, absolutely, it's fed in, and we feel looking at the interface between the right geological setting, obviously, and that right structural setting, which is the fault, that gets us actually the vast majority of our targets, your Atlas Souths, your Enterprises, your Junos, your Voyagers, etc., like that. So it doesn't change our thinking. It's just all part of the same continuum.
Yeah. And I believe you now have an XRF machine, it's handheld, I think, which X-rays the cores as they're coming out. So you have an idea of what it is you're seeing, which could dictate, I presume, a lot quicker any further adjustments that you might make.
Yeah, look, XRF guns have been around for a long time, Liam. They're really handy, especially on the rig side. And they are X-ray fluorescence. They basically, form a sort of X-ray spectrum, and you can detect most metals. You can theoretically detect gold with them, but of course they have a limited beam size, so they're better for more abundant minerals and metals. Not specifically great for actually detecting gold, but of course copper tends to ride shotgun with gold in the Havieron system. Not always, but even in low levels it does. So that's certainly something that will help us. They're expensive. They're hard to get hold of. I think we bought the last two available in Australia. And look, they're not what I would necessarily describe as a quantitative tool. It's not going to replace assays in the true sense, but from a sort of qualitative perspective, i.e., generally what's there, what are the pointers? It helps you drive the decisions. Do you want to push the hole deeper? Do you want to move up the next hole? Yeah, they're really useful and great bit of kit to have. And we've been striving to have one up there for quite some time.
Just touching briefly on what you just said there, if it's not detecting and showing like straight gold, what kind of minerals are you looking for that suggests that gold is nearby? Because that's kind of how it works, isn't it?
Look, the best one obviously is copper. Because you tend to see it was certainly in certain parts of Havieron, not always, but it does have low level. So copper anomalism is a pretty good clue. There's another element called bismuth that does seem to have an association both regionally around Telfer and around Havieron. Look, one comment I'd make about, and I'm purely observing as you guys do. From the news releases. I think one thing that's quite stark about looking at the cross sections of Havieron is how distinct the boundaries are. Okay, you seem to sort of go nothing, and then into fantastic grade, and then nothing. So in terms of pathfinders, I mean it does limit what you might see, say in a more Kalgoorlie style setting, and some of your more technical listeners will be sort of aware of what I'm saying, where you have what we call a supergene halo, whether it's been oxidized by water and weather and basically spread out its signature. It's a little more distinct where we are because it's much old. It's been covered. But look, at the end of the day, those sort of bismuth copper readings are sort of thing, to give you a tip of what our guys would be looking for. That's kind of what they'd be looking for.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Moving over to Carlow Castle, you mentioned at the start of the show there that you've actually managed to get out and get your feet on the ground and have a look. What's happening over there at the moment?
Right. Well, first of all, it was bloody hot. 43 degrees and 100% humidity was even. I've spent years out in the bush And even by Aussie standards, that was pretty darn trying. Yeah, we got out on the ground really early. We were one of the first companies back out drilling after the Christmas. In fact, our guys took a very short Christmas break, and big sort of shout. They know who they are. Thank you for, putting your body on the line for that. And the simple reason is we knew assay turnaround times were slow. So the best way to mitigate that is the sooner you drill, the sooner you get them back, right? So that was our theory. We finished about 8,000 metres of drilling about a month ago. Most of that was RC, a couple of diamond holes, and because we particularly liked some sections we saw. What is going on at Greater Carlo? Look, Greater Carlo, we've currently got quite a number of work streams going on. Primarily, we're sort of redoing the resource. Okay, we feel that the mineralisation doesn't disappear, and my simplest way to explain this to people is, we had basically had the model wrong. We're redoing the model to be correct, and then we'll get the correct resource for what we're looking for. But the whole sort of pretense to Carlo, what's important about Carlo? Why is it interesting to you, me, and why I think it'll be interesting to market? First of all, it's 20 kilometres from Karratha. You literally can get off a Qantas 737 and you can be standing on the project, staying within speed limits, of course, within about 20 minutes. Okay, so you're not in the middle of nowhere. Any development there wouldn't need a mine site village, airstrip, and all those sort of associated things. Fantastic. What do we like about Carlo? Why have we persisted? Why haven't we listened to the naysayers? Well, first of all, I think as a management group, I don't think we can be accused of chasing rainbows. Projects that we don't think meets a certain criteria, we will find a way of monetising them so we don't have to raise extra capital. Very simple model. And we've done that very successfully between sales back to Novo to IPO and green tech, all the various tools. We're probably, I don't know, $25 million. And that's all shares that have not had to be issued to spend on drilling Patterson's and Carlo. We think Carlo is a higher grade system. What do we mean by that? When costs go up in this industry, the marginal producers, by definition, are the first ones that get hit. Okay, a lower grade people. We don't aspire to be a low grade gold mine. We think that looking at the mineralisation where it's thick, we have a thing called a grade tonnage curve. We think there's the ability to reduce the amount of tonnes you have in it, not try and be the biggest and grab for every ounce, but have high quality ounces. Okay, that's what we're chasing, and we're working on that model now. In between that, Steve, our GM, and his team spent a lot of time working, sort of trying to unpick the riddle of what's going on at Carlo. Because what we have is a big, long east-west structure. It's about a kilometre long, and we've got a lot of drilling into that. Okay, and that's what the resource was based on. Subsequent to that, and through the simple art of opening one's eyes, we noticed that a whole lot of sort of Depression era scratchings have been made north and south. And by scratchings, I mean old timers going out there dry blowing for gold. And that is always a good place to look, whether you're in Africa, Australia, or anywhere. And we discovered the crosscuts on the basis of that. Okay. We started drilling them at the end of last year, and we got some, if you have a look at our news releases in the sort of November, December, they were absolutely cracking. And what crosscuts shown is a couple of things that, of course, are the key to new mineralised areas that you want to help base a gold mine around. Shallow, good grade copper, good grade gold. Okay, that's exactly what we're after. The crosscut areas from what we've seen so far seem to be waver between a gold-copper system and a copper-gold system. Fabulous. We love both metals. Subsequently, what we went and did is using some geophysical trickery called SAM, suboideo magnetics. We actually got a signature. We think we got a signature, and we put them in our last releases. And so it looks like there's three distinct bands that go like this, and they're about 600-700 metres long. And so we've gone out and drilled them. So we've drilled about 22 holes. They're parallel. They sit just above the main section. They're parallel like this. We've gone out and drilled them, and those assays will be back with us, I would have thought, as soon as next week. Okay? So we'll start to see those, and we'll finally be back into some news flow, because it seems like forever since we had some news flow to give shareholders. So what does that mean for the project? Well, shallow and good grade is the best way in the world to start with a potential mine. So let's see what we get from that. We're pretty bullish. I think you might have seen some pretty pictures of, we drilled some diamond core in there as well that we'll use for metallurgy. You use diamond core for metallurgical studies as well. And we hit some great, you can see the pictures for yourself. We hit some massive sulfides in there, massive copper sulfides, etc. So we're pretty excited to see what all those assays will come back in. Also, I think you may remember the Chapman Discovery we made right at the back end of last year. We drilled a hole and we got 10 metres at 3.4% copper and 1.75% gold.
Yeah,
from a pretty shallow downhole. I can't remember the exact depth, but I think below surface it was less than 100 metres. Okay, pretty good wildcatting. This sits a kilometre south of Carlo. It was a geophysical target. We've now drilled 13 holes into that. 13 holes along about 700 metre strike length. Okay, it's got a nice magnetic signature. Far less enigmatic than the Carlo or main ore body, which has no geophysical signature at all. And we're really excited by that. Now let's wait for the assays.
Yep.
But, that sort of multi-metal sort of gold, copper, nickel systems are, of course, of great interest to us. Let's see what we get. And, we're really excited about seeing what Chapman can be. So what does it mean? What's the output? What's the point where the penny drops and, we can provide the information to make the penny drop? First of all, a new resource for the main ore body. And that will only be, for the moment, drilling up to the end of last year. It won't include the current, the further 8,000 metres we've done. That will give people a really good steer of where we're heading. Okay, so let's wait for that work to be done. We then add on the work we've done. And our desire as a management group is for people to go, okay, I get it. Okay, they've been able to shrink the number of tonnes in the resource, and why can you and lift the grade, and how can you afford to do that? Because you haven't included all these other exploration areas that, by the way, have been drilled. So you should hopefully be able to put two and two together and come up with what we've always said we wanted to do, was put together a sort of 1 million ounce equivalent type ore body there. And hopefully those things come in as we expect them to do, to be self-evident to the market and the industry. And, what's it worth, Liam? Well, I don't think it's appropriate for me to opine on that, but, what is it worth? What are the factors around that? Already told you about location, nowhere better, close to town, services, high voltage power, all that sort of stuff that flows into potential development capex. And of course, we haven't done that work, but I'm just opining on the sort of macro things you look at. Better grade, hopefully we can put together a much better grade resource. We expect to be able to deliver that and build it up to that size that we've always said. Well, how many of those are lying around in Western Australia at the moment, owned by a junior company with a market cap of, 50 million Aussie dollars with 15.2 in cash and shares at the end of Q1. And we happen to own a plant, that's not ready for production as a value asset down the road. It starts to be a pretty compelling investment picture, right? So we think that will put us in a pretty unique position. There are lots of companies around with big developments going on that would be interested in working with us in some way, potentially. They've got big balance sheets and lots of cash. But we're just sticking to doing what we're doing. The exciting part and the fun part, as I'm sure your listeners will know, especially certainly with the great and gold thing, is I don't feel we've even started with that fun bit of the better resources, growing resources, getting bigger, how big is it, those sort of questions. That tends to be a pretty value accretive place in development profile for shareholders going forward. And we don't even feel we've made that first step up, because I personally look at our market cap today and I don't see any value for really many of our assets built into the cake.
So that time again for a junior exploration company is the biggest factor in all of this. It's not a question of 12 weeks time and everything's going to change. This is a slow process that over time, if the targets are met and things work in your favor and X, Y, Z, they're all equal, the prize at the end, if that's the best
Yep.
way of saying it. I don't want to put
No,
words
I
into
think that's a good way of saying it, Lee.
invest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good analogy. I mean, we see it as a prize. I mean, we make no bones about it. You know, we are financial investors in this company. Your listeners who are shareholders and are financial investors. You know, that's what we're here to do, is to make money. To be clear, we're not here to prove that we can build mines. We've all done it before. Okay, what we're here to do is to make money for our investors. Okay, and which we are as well. In terms of time, yeah, things are going slower. Look, there are challenges out there without question, and certainly the assay turnaround time is probably the biggest one, because typically, in a normal quote unquote market, you might wait 4 weeks for your assays. So while you're still drilling your program, you would typically start getting the assays back from the first holes, and that shortens your iteration by definition, right? But look,
Yeah.
you know, we just have a simple philosophy: is the sooner we drill, the sooner we get assays back. Because sort of whinging about slow labs is simply that, whinging. It's not going to change anything. Okay. Now, I do feel confident that these times will start to come down, because everyone's trying to scale up as much as they possibly can. But no, I don't expect a silver bullet on that. In terms of delivering that prize, though, Liam, I do feel, even, with, these constraints, I feel, we have a good chance of delivering that this year. I don't think we're all going to die on the vine waiting. This isn't a case of waiting years and years and years to develop. It will either be delivered or be self-evident to the market in advance of delivery. I think within calendar 22,
which is just, it's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's exciting. Do you think that, no, that wasn't the question at all. How many holes have you got planned for the rest of 2022 between your two large tenements and projects that you've got going on at the moment?
Well, look, I think we gave decent guidance on the Pattersons. Okay, we have sort of 10 to 12,000 metres in the budget there. That would be sort of 10 plus holes, however deep they are. And again, every hole tells you what you're going to do next. And of course, with a clear discovery hole, well, all bets are off, right? We'll have 5 rigs out there, etc. But look, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. That's the basic guidance of the Patterson. I don't think that's changed. Okay. In terms of how we develop Carlo, well, that's a great question, because it's something, with the sort of extraneous circumstances, not having the benefit of having the assays, it does make it hard to plan. Look, the neat thing about Carlo, and you'll always get some surprises, by the way. Sometimes you see a hole that looks fabulous, and it happens at Carlo as well. There is a good reason we assay. But look, we're very confident of, I'm sure we'll deliver some fabulous holes from Carlo. Look, we're already planning those next programs, because they are pretty obvious of what we would do. So look, I wouldn't expect us to be, we will be out drilling back at Carlo. But I think this time, because we submitted our assays so early in the year, Liam, when everyone else was, well, not everyone else was still on holiday, but a lot of people were only recently back from holiday. We're seeing them in fair time, as I said, imminent, as soon as next week. And, I think that's allowed us, I think we've got a pretty fair idea of where we're going to drill. How many holes on that? Look, I don't want to avoid the question. I just think it'd be a little bit disingenuous to try and give you specifics, because I think that I'd allow the team to plan that. But what kind of holes would they be? Well, I could probably give you a little bit of a steer on that. Look, we've got very obvious targets we're drilling at the moment. They're shallow. They're basically from surface, a lot of them. And, we've got a clear idea of what sort of holes they might constitute. What they won't constitute is close-spaced infill drilling, okay? We don't need to do that yet. At some stage, that always has to be done in a project. But we're still kind of walking around in a darkened room trying to find the sides of the wall, right? Our sort of holes we'll be drilling will be fence line of drill holes here, 400 metres away, fence line of drill holes. So I'll try and get myself on screen and just drill a line in the middle, because they're the ones that add you the most inferred ounces for the least amount of money. Okay, so I hate to sort of be jingoistic, but they're kind of your exciting holes. That 2 drill holes has added another X 100 metres of length to this deposit. That's the kind of drilling we're looking to do. Okay, it's the bigger stuff. Now, as with anything, eventually you run out of those sort of holes and you get down to your nitty gritty, as you sort of would have seen at Javiera. They did all the infill. Now they're actually going back into the funner stuff, right? But for reasons that are obvious, they needed to do the indicated resource stuff first so they could build the mine and get it going ASAP to feed Telfer. Now they're doing the funner stuff. They're sort of stepping out, up thing, and look, that's all great. But at the moment, our next program at Carlo will be that step out stuff. That, oh my God, it's got this much bigger. That kind of drilling. Okay, we're still very much at that phase. We're still arm wrestling over where to drill amongst the team. As I said, I've done this enough. Eventually, you run out of those big ideas, and they're not big ideas because they're coming home, but eventually you run out of those targets, and you'll get back to that inferred to indicated, indicated to measured type stuff as you move up the program. Okay, but we're still I call it the fun phase, but I'm an exploration geologist. I would say that.
Yeah. You're the fun for yourself is putting that needle into that haystack and or fishing and seeing what comes straight out.
Look, discovery is what gets you up in the morning. The team, it makes them work under extreme pressure, both real and imagined. To deliver for shareholders, to work in, very, very trying conditions. This summer was the hottest I've ever heard of in Western Australia. Thankfully, all the rain ended up on the East Coast, Liam. So so we did do well with that. But the quid pro quo of that was it was extremely hot, and our guys and girls really pushed through. I'm back out there in 2 weeks' time, taking some people up around Carlo, etc. as well. So. Keep an eye out for some more pictures on the Twitter as we start to get those assays back, and we can take some analysts up there and we can walk around with assay sheets and have a look, and it all gets very real, right? Very real, very quickly.
Which is just again, that's just the exciting part. I think as an investor, that's the sort of thing that I do love to see, is when you get these behind the scenes images that show something's going on and you can see what the investment's doing. Whereas if you don't see any of that, it's just a number on the screen. Whereas you do manage to share with your shareholders that these little intricacies that show them exactly what it is that's going on. It's just brilliant. So.
Well, what's important is it helps contextualise for people if you understand the work that has to be undertaken. And look, exploration's hard work, but it's not a complaint. We love it that people choose to do it. I chose to do it. But with that comes all those sort of rewards, both financial, professional, and I'm afraid, exploration geologists are just. We're all just overly curious people that are always looking, looking for that, what was under that over there. But we don't just put it up for cynical market employees just to sort of, spike people. I think people are generally interested, and we get great feedback. I didn't realise that's how it all works. Now I understand. It's not just a game of battleships moving your counters around. It's not that simple, and it's once you contextualise for people. I think it really helps to bring people along with you. At the end of the day, it's people's money, Liam, and we take that extremely seriously. And if they can understand where their money's going, and they can form more informed opinions about what we're doing, whether we're any good or not, and can shoot complaints at us that are valid, etc. Fine. I can only see that as a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the time. Is there anything that I've not covered that you'd like to cover?
Look, I think that's great. All I would suggest is, current share price where it is today. I'll make these comments like I did before camera. It's unacceptable where the share price is, and that is a fact. I contend, and I've spoken to our major institutional shareholders who are very much supportive, and no one's happy. And no one's less happy with the share price than myself. All I would suggest to people is, I don't believe the investment thesis for Artemis has waned. In fact, if anything, it's gone up in terms of valuation. I'm afraid these sort of downdrafts are, I've seen them all before, and there'll be more again. They're unpleasant, and it doesn't make you feel good. But the factors affecting Artemis at the moment and our ability to deliver pleasingly are still within our hands. As I said, we're well funded. We don't have to go to market. We don't have to raise money. No one has to be diluted at these levels. And I'm really confident the exploration team have already delivered and will deliver with the things that are coming up that you'll read about over the next weeks. And I'm hopeful that the macro space will just calm down a bit, and we can all put our hats back on the right way and straighten up our britches and say, right, okay, back to work and onwards with the company. But thanks again for your time, Liam. I appreciate it as always.
No worries. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.